My name's Dr. Cathy and I work in the emergency department as a doctor. I'm going to tell you a bit about what happened to me quite a few years ago. I was sitting in the coffee room at work, and one of the other staff members said to me, "You should have known better." Of course, what she was referring to was the time prior to working in that job, where I'd actually been a patient myself, and I had attended the emergency department, A&E as it was then, on several occasions. In fact, rather more occasions than I'd care to think, because I had self-harmed. About 7 years prior to that, I'd been given a diagnosis of depression and put on a lot of medication. So I was in a kind of bit of brain fog, I guess. It was quite difficult to think clearly, and I'm not really sure when the self-harm started. But basically what happened was, at first I was self-harming secretly. I thought nobody knew. And, it was quite hard to actually pin down what on earth it was all about. And it wasn't really until after I recovered that I could actually think clearly about what had been happening to me. I'd had a lot of ECT as well as the medication, so sometimes my memory wasn't that good. But the one thing that kept me away from self-harm and hospital was the feeling of shame. So when it first started, as I say, it was all a bit secret, and I was getting up in the middle of the night, hurting myself and not telling anybody about it. It was a distraction, I knew that, but there was more to it than that. And part of it was the pain which I caused myself, which was definitely taking away something of my mental suffering. But I think after a while, I just got frightened about it all. So then when I was on the ward, I saw other people doing things which I hadn't really thought of before. And I did have an experiment with cutting myself, and that was my arms. It's something I really regret even to this day, because once you've got scars, you can't get rid of them. So that 5 minutes was not good, but nothing serious happened. I didn't go to the doctor, although my husband did actually find somebody who put some steri strips and things on. Later on, when I was in hospital, things got a bit more serious. And I ended up being taken to the A&E where I'd worked as a doctor. That was not good. I thought of myself as somebody who had failed. I felt like I'd failed as a doctor, I'd failed as a mother, I failed as a wife. And so my self-esteem was extremely low. Then when I came across people who actually thought that I was doing the wrong thing, I was being irresponsible, I just went down. It was like a spiral. So I felt that I was on the floor and they were trampling me underfoot. There were one or two people who were positively punitive. One particular surgeon who I ended up seeing said to me, "Oh, so you weren't satisfied with what I did last time?" And he sutured me without any anaesthetic. I didn't cry out, I didn't scream, I didn't complain, because that was how I was. I was this very quiet person, but it went in. Those words were extremely damaging to me. So not only that, but when I was around on the street, in the times when I wasn't in hospital, people would say things like, "Cheer up, love, it's never going to happen." And I thought, well, actually it has. And then there was a family member who said, "You look perfectly all right to me." There were friends who kind of slipped away because, let's face it, I wasn't much fun to be with. And then, my family, I wasn't really relating to them in the way I should, and I was arguing with my husband. All sorts of things were going horribly wrong, and I couldn't really talk to anybody. So they thought I should have some CBT. And the CBT therapist said to me, "Look, Cathy, you go to A&E, you don't enjoy it, it's an awful experience. So why are you doing this? Surely you should stop." And I thought, you don't get it. Then they suggested that actually I talk to people before I self-harm. So, I go and I'd knock on the door of the nursing station, and I would be told, "Oh, why don't you distract yourself with music? Why don't you listen to TV?" They even gave me elastic bands, to a ping on my wrist. And I just felt, you don't get it. You don't understand. And that was it. I felt very lonely and very isolated. And I think, when I look back now, perhaps it became something I could control. Everything else in my life was out of control. And so, this gave me an ability to do something. And it was also very symbolic. It was like me saying to the world, to everybody else, I'm hurting inside so much that I'm going to hurt myself. So things weren't getting better. Whatever they did, it didn't work. And in the end, they actually wrote my prognosis that I would never work again. But even worse than that, they thought that the self-harm was becoming so extreme that I was going to die. Through this, I was actually sent for a novel treatment at the time, which I don't think happens, thankfully. And that was a kind of brain surgery. I was part of a research project. I was sectioned, and again, actually, and I had a nurse with me 24 hours a day. One day, I was sitting in a TV room, and another patient came in, and she said something which really irritated me. "All I want is to be with my husband and children." And I just felt like, oh, shut up. And just at that moment, it was like a generator, came on, and the power cables came together, and I felt almost a physical light sensation. And after that, I had a thought which was so loud it almost felt like a voice, and it was, what about the self-harm? And I kind of internally spoke back to it, and I said, I don't want to do this anymore. And this happened several times over the next couple of days. And each time I was just like, I don't want to do this anymore. And things changed for me. Things changed pretty rapidly. It was like I was suddenly back in control. And, the prognosis had been that I would never work again. And the prognosis had been that, in fact, that they thought I was going to die as a result of the way I was so self-destructive. Well, within a year, I was back at work. It wasn't easy. I'm not going to pretend it was. It was really difficult to sort of get on again and start living life with my family, with my husband and with my children. And we didn't actually have much help. So it could have gone a lot worse. But we muddled through, and I went back to work. And then I started really thinking about what happened to me. What would have helped me sooner? And I think when I look back, what would have helped would have been if I'd have been able to talk about my childhood and the past, the things which brought the crisis in the first place. And it seemed at that time people weren't really willing to listen to that and to actually concede that things which to other people don't seem to be terribly devastating were to me. And then secondly, I think when the self-harm was happening, it would have been really helpful if people actually asked me why, but they didn't. They would treat whatever had happened as a result of it. Some of them, as I say, had been less than kind. And so, you know, if I met somebody, that staff member again today, and she said to me, "You should have known better," my answer to her would be, "And so should you."